Welcome to this explainer. If you thought global conflict was still just about traditional front lines and massive armies, well, 2026 is proving that the landscape has totally shifted. Today, we're diving into how the absolute biggest threats to global stability right now are this bizarre, deeply unsettling mix. On one hand, you have these massive, slow-moving geopolitical pressure campaigns, and on the other, digitized, monetized military secrets happening right inside the pockets of trusted soldiers. It's wild.
So let's unpack this. Modern military readiness is basically being stress-tested on two completely different, yet equally terrifying fronts. It is no longer just a numbers game of who has the biggest weapons. It's about who can exploit the tiniest cracks in the system. We're going to look at a massive global standoff first, and then transition into a shocking internal breach of trust that honestly feels like it was ripped straight out of a cyberpunk novel.
All right, starting at the macro level. Right now, the tension in Taipei is palpable. What we're watching unfold in the Taiwan Strait is a massive surge in Chinese military activity. We're talking warships, fighter jets, and live fire drills creeping closer and closer to Taiwan's front lines. Now, at first glance, you might think, okay, we've seen this kind of posturing before. But intelligence assessments and defense experts are saying this is something much more calculated. This is a very slow, very deliberate test of boundaries.
And what's really fascinating here is the underlying strategy. China isn't launching a traditional all-out invasion. Instead, they are leaning heavily on what we call gray zone tactics. If you're not familiar, these are military and political actions that stop just shy of actual war, but push right up to the absolute edge to pressure an adversary. Beijing's goal here is control without conflict. It's essentially boiling the frog slowly, right? Making sure no single move is aggressive enough to trigger a massive global retaliation.
So what does that actually look like day to day? Well, we are talking about relentless daily airspace incursions, naval patrols hovering right near key islands, and military drills that are explicitly simulating blockades. Throw in a heavy dose of economic leverage and psychological warfare, and you've got a pressure cooker. It is a strategy designed to just totally exhaust Taiwan's defenses over time without crossing that red line into an all-out global response.
And in global geopolitics, timing is absolutely everything. While all this pressure is building up in the Pacific, the United States is incredibly stretched right now due to the ongoing 2026 Iran war. Stockpiles are depleted, attention is divided. Analysts firmly believe that Beijing is looking at Washington's current situation and seeing a wide-open strategic window to really test the limits.
Now, why does this matter to the rest of us? Because Taiwan is literally the beating heart of the global semiconductor industry. The stakes of this gray zone pressure actually tipping over into a conflict are just monumental. If things escalate, we are looking at the immediate collapse of global supply chains and an instant freeze of tech industries worldwide. Everything from the smartphone in your pocket to the most advanced military defense systems relies entirely on these chips. The economic shockwaves would be massive, crippling, and immediate.
But honestly, here is the most terrifying part of this entire macro situation. The true danger right now isn't necessarily that China intends to start a war tomorrow. The real danger is a deadly miscalculation. When you have heavily armed warships and fighter jets operating this incredibly close to each other every single day, the margin for error is exactly zero. Just one wrong move, a mid-air interception gone wrong, or a naval collision in the Strait could literally escalate this calculated test into a full-scale global conflict overnight.
Okay, so those are the massive global stakes, but let's completely switch gears for a second and zoom way in on an entirely new micro-level vulnerability. Because while the Pentagon has all eyes on radar screens in the Pacific, an entirely unprecedented threat was quietly unfolding on a smartphone.
This is where things get genuinely bizarre. Federal authorities recently arrested a U.S. Special Forces soldier named Gannon Ken Van Dyke. The charge? Insider trading. But not on Wall Street. On the highly classified U.S. military raid that captured Venezuela's Nicolas Maduro. Van Dyke actually participated in the planning and execution of that mission, and according to prosecutors, he took that highly classified inside knowledge, went online, and placed bets on the prediction market platform Polymarket.
$409,000. Let that number sink in for a second. That is the staggering amount of profit Van Dyke allegedly walked away with. Federal authorities state he wagered around $33,000 on the outcome of the Maduro operation. He essentially treated a top-secret, high-stakes military mission as his own personal insider trading gig, monetizing national security secrets for a massive personal payday.
And the digital paper trail on this is just wild. Between late December 2025 and late January 2026,
Prosecutors say he placed 13 separate bets on Polymarket. Fast forward to January 3rd, the U.S. military successfully captures Maduro. 2 days later, as Maduro is arriving in handcuffs in New York City, Van Dyke actually uploads a sunrise photo of himself in military fatigues on the deck of a ship to his Google account. The very next day, January 6th, he contacts Polymarket trying to delete his account entirely, falsely claiming he lost access to his email.
And his evasion tactics? They're just as modern as the crime itself. To hide almost $500,000 in illicit gambling profits, prosecutors say he executed a highly sophisticated money laundering procedure. First, he withdrew the vast majority of the money on the exact same day of the Maduro operation. Then, he sent those funds straight into a foreign cryptocurrency vault to obscure the digital trail. Finally, he deposited the laundered money into a newly created online brokerage account. He was literally executing advanced financial evasion right under the military's nose. The reaction from leadership to this totally unprecedented event has been pretty striking. When asked about the arrest, President Donald Trump expressed a really clear distaste for this bizarre new reality. He compared it to Pete Rose betting on his own team and noted that the whole world, unfortunately, has become somewhat of a casino. It really perfectly captures the surreal, unsettling nature of a soldier placing bets on a geopolitical raid.
And right on the heels of that, we get the harsh law enforcement reality from FBI Director Kash Patel. His statement makes it crystal clear that no one is above the law and highlights the absolute non-negotiable necessity of safeguarding operational secrets. When trusted individuals monetize classified operations, it doesn't just break the law, it directly jeopardizes the mission, the troops, and national security as a whole. It's a really stark reminder that our front line of defense now has to include protecting digital secrets from the very people we trust to keep them.
So when you put these two unbelievable situations side by side, a really tense, complex picture of 2026 emerges. The U.S. military is stretched dangerously thin between these immense, slow-burn macro threats in the Pacific and these shocking, instantaneous micro-breaches of trust from within. We're living in a world where global trade is threatened by warships on one side, and a trusted soldier can monetize a classified op from a smartphone on the other. It is an incredible, terrifying duality. Which really just leaves us with one massive final thought to ponder. Whether we are talking about adversarial warships creeping closer in the Taiwan Strait or a digital crypto wallet secretly filling up on the deck of a Navy ship, we have to wonder, are these strange, disjointed vulnerabilities just isolated tests of a deeply stressed system, or are we witnessing the beginning of a much darker, highly unpredictable new era of global conflict? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I highly recommend you keep your eyes peeled on both the massive geopolitical moves and those tiny micro-digital footprints.